Hello, everybody. Welcome to Live at Lunch. This is the Wednesday show.
Chris, that was for you.
Yeah, that's for Chris. I'm Becca, the outreach coordinator.
I'm Olivia, the prevention coordinator.
And we're going to start off every show like we do, letting you know that the WCA is still open and our services are still available for anyone who might need them. If you or someone you know needs services or needs assistance in some kind of way or anything like that, call the WCA's hotline, 24-hour hotline at 208-343-7025, or if it's not safe for you to make a call, you can go to our crisis center at 720 West Washington Street.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Cool. So as some of you may or may not know, May is Mental Health Awareness Month. If you got our lovely newsletter sent out by Becca this morning, then you already know that. If not, then now you know. But today we're going to be talking about something that's really important just every day, but also especially important during Mental Health Awareness Month, and that is boundaries. So I think everyone has a different definition or understanding of boundaries, but today we're going to be talking about boundaries as in things that you are and are not okay with. So things you typically like other people's behavior towards you that you are not okay with, but also talking about ourselves. So we can set boundaries for our own behavior and actions towards ourselves, and that's also really important. So some things to need to know. So if you need to set a boundary, if you don't know if something is or isn't a boundary for you, a good thing to look at is if you're feeling resentment or discomfort or guilt about something, then that's a good indication that maybe that's a boundary for you and something that you need to set and look at.
Yeah, I think oftentimes we don't notice our boundaries until someone comes into contact with them and we didn't realize that that was some kind of boundary that we had. So like Liv said, if you're noticing a little bit of discomfort happen and you're not quite sure why, that's a good time to stop and evaluate what might be happening to cause those feelings in yourself.
Mm-hmm. And when we talk about boundaries and things that you might feel uncomfortable with, we're not just talking about like physical things, like physical touching or things that happen in a romantic or not romantic partnership, but we're also talking about mental and emotional boundaries and boundaries with time as well. I think especially during quarantine, it's really important to talk about our time boundaries in terms of work. So if you're working really late at night or for more than your typical workday because you have access to all of your work things and it's making you feel run down and tired and potentially anxious or maybe resentment towards your job, then that's maybe a time to think about setting a boundary for your work hours. So maybe sticking to what your normal work hours would be because that might be something that you're crossing.
The thing about boundaries is they're so individual, so it's not that everyone can say this is a boundary that you should create for yourself. It has to be come from you and what you need to feel safe and like you're in a healthy relationship with whoever, romantic or non-romantic.
Yeah, so boundaries are different than like a social norm. Like I wouldn't leave like the bathroom and immediately go and shake Becca's hand with like a wet hand or something. That's a social norm and that's kind of weird. But a boundary is something.
Why did it come immediately to your
I
head?
have no
that
idea.
Was so quick.
I don't know. I think that's something that I might feel anxious about. Like when I leave the bathroom, my hands are so wet. Like I'm afraid.
Like I just washed my hands. Everyone does that whenever they shake with like a barely wet hand. They're like, I just washed my hands.
Yeah, it's like a
subconscious sweaty palms.
Anxiety thing. Oh, hi, Grandma.
Hi,
But a boundary is something that we all feel differently and we all have different boundaries. So the ones that I have are going to be very different from Becca's, as you both know. And that's okay. And it's really important for us to be able to discuss those. So if I do something that maybe makes Becca uncomfortable or, bothers her, I need to understand that like when she sits down and says, hey Liv, you did this and it made me feel this way, can we maybe not do that in the future? I have to respect that, and that's really important to not cross that boundary again.
Yeah, and when someone tells you a boundary, it's important to be in the right mindset of knowing like, okay, I may have done something that made this person uncomfortable. That doesn't mean that the relationship is necessarily broken. There's always ways to move forward from that, just as long as you're open to respecting those boundaries.
I also think when someone tells me that I've crossed a boundary, I sometimes have a tendency to feel like I'm a really bad person or that I did something wrong. But reminding yourself that, you know, it's okay. Everyone has different boundaries you didn't know, and you'll do better in the future, and giving yourself some grace is really important.
Yeah.
Hi, Chris.
Hi, Chris.
Yeah.
Morning.
Well, if anyone has any questions, we'll be happy to answer them.
But
oh my gosh, that's 5 minutes.
Well, we just blew through that.
Boundaries really quick. Yeah. We do an activity actually with the school groups that we go to, or when a teacher requests us to come into a classroom to talk about healthy relationships. We'll do the components that we did in one of our previous lives, the components of a healthy relationship. And then to follow that up, we'll do this activity where we talk about boundaries, but we talk about them in a way where we give all the students these little blue cards. I think we've shown them before, and they have scenarios on them, and then we'll have signs up on the whiteboard that say always okay, sometimes okay, and never okay, and the students will go up and they'll place them under whatever category they feel they belong under, and then we'll have a discussion. And during that discussion, it often comes up that one student thought was always okay, another will say, I'm actually not okay with that. That's only sometimes okay for me. Or in this scenario, it is okay, but in this scenario, it's not okay for me. So there'll be a discussion about different people's boundaries, and I think that's really important for young people to have that dialogue and understand other people's perspectives in regards to situations that could kind of toe the line between being okay and not being okay.
Yeah, I think something that always comes from that activity is at the end, almost all of the scenarios are in the sometimes okay category. So understanding that depending on the person or the situation, some actions, some behaviors are okay in that context or with that person, and some are not okay with other people.
Yeah, and I think discovering your own boundaries, especially as a young person, is really difficult. I think a lot of times we're told when we're younger what is okay and what's not okay, but figuring out what's okay for you personally as a young person can be really challenging and overwhelming if someone does something and you don't feel good about it, but you've never been told that that's something that's not okay or is okay. So figuring that out and then being able to have a voice and say something about that is really important. So I think starting that dialogue is always really eye-opening for youth.
Also having the, courage to bring up that this was a boundary crossed, that's a really important skill to learn, and it's a skill that needs to be practiced.
Yeah.
It's not just something that comes naturally to people.
No,
especially,
we're still practicing it.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Especially if you feel, I feel like there's a worry that you will embarrass the other person, or that you will make them uncomfortable or make them feel badly, and that's not the intention of bringing up your boundaries. It's so that your relationship can be better. It's not to put the other person down or make them feel that they've done something wrong. It's just to let them know that this was a boundary for me, and so that we can move forward in this relationship. If that's your goal, this needs to not happen again. Yeah. And there's a way to do that, like with all communication, respectfully, and giving the other person some, like you said, grace. Yeah.
There's also a really disrespectful way to set boundaries, and that is not how you want to go about things.
Yeah.
So
I guess we should talk about there's levels to boundaries. So I feel like there's levels. Yeah. So you can say, this is a boundary that I realized you crossed, and I can't accept that, and this is the end of the relationship. Like, you have that right, I think, to do that.
I think this is where, in the activity, we then cover the signs, the always okay, sometimes okay, never okay signs up with respect, sometimes respectful, and then red flag. And I think this is where, like, red flag versus deal breaker comes in. And I know that that's, like, a joking game that a lot of people play. Like, would this be a red flag or a deal breaker for you? But it's, like, a real thing. Like, would this just be a warning sign, maybe, that you need to set that boundary with that person, or is it a deal breaker and that relationship can't continue?
Yeah.
Good point.
Let's see what Chris says. Can we give an example of one conversation two of us have had for boundaries? I think using the car.
You know what I think of immediately though was when we had to go to an orientation And at orientation, we had to talk about things that, because we're living in community and that's a really big part of Jesuit Volunteer Corps, and we have to talk about things that we are and are not okay with. And it came up like our personal boundaries, and I said, I'm not okay with hugs. I don't really enjoy being hugged or touched. Like, it often makes me uncomfortable. And that is something that we've held on to. And then now we don't ever really hug or touch or anything like that, which is like fine, but I feel the need to like qualify what that boundary actually is for me. I don't like to be hugged or touched by people that I don't know or have a relationship with, so I think that would have been really important for me to say in the beginning when I set that boundary. It's also a very weird boundary to set with people you don't really know, like, hey, don't ever touch me. It's like a very bizarre thing to say. So that was a learning experience for me. Like, maybe when you're setting that boundary, be like, hey, I'm not really comfortable with hugs right now, like I want to build our relationship and we can build up to those.
I do remember that. Yeah, that was a good one. You were very good at communicating that boundary though.
Was I? Because
yeah.
now
I mean it worked.
It did work. It did
work a little too well.
Yeah. What are some other ones?
I think, see, the problem is we don't really have a lot of
crazy boundaries between each other. Yeah.
Conflict, I don't think. Little things like, okay, if we're bringing other people over, letting someone know, I think.
Yeah.
That's a boundary for roommates.
For space sharing.
Yeah, space sharing.
I think one that was really important for me too was like, my friends back home were all really good at keeping in touch with one another and letting each other know where we're at. And I think in the beginning, it was really weird to feel like you have to check in with someone that you don't know, like, hey, I'm coming home from work, or hey, I'm going and doing this. But that was really important for me in terms of like feeling respected and like understood. Like, if I'm making dinner, I want to know where everyone is so I can make it at the right time so I'm not eating alone. And that was a really big boundary that I had trouble conveying.
Yeah, but we got better at it.
Yeah,
and now we're good. As far as things like timeliness and stuff like that.
Yeah, hard conversations, but really important and makes your relationship stronger, like ours.
Definitely.
Hey, Tracy.
Hi, Tracy. Yeah.
If anyone has any other questions, I think that's all we got.
It's Mental Health Awareness Month, so make sure you're all doing what you need to do to take care of your mental and emotional well-being during this time. Especially if you're noticing small things start to happen that might be little warning signs or signs that things aren't going quite well for your mental health. Taking some time to slow down and check in and take stock of what's happening and all that. Yeah.
Alrighty.
I think that's all we have for today. So thanks for tuning in. And again, our services are still available for anyone who might need them. As we enter this new phase, Governor Little put out his phased rebound for Idaho's reopening. We'll keep everyone updated on anything that might be changing, but as for now, it's as it has been. You can always call our hotline at 208-343-7025 if you need any kind of assistance. All right.
Bye,
Have
everyone.
a great day.
See you next Wednesday.